I first realised I had a problem on New Year's Day a few years ago. I was walking down the street in London. It was a bitterly cold day, and there was a beautiful sunset, all kind of manner of purples, oranges, pinks and reds in the sky. And rather than standing there and appreciating the sunset and thinking it's the first day of the year and I've already seen an amazing sunset, I started to think, I wonder which Instagram filter I could use on my phone to take a picture of that sunset. So I got my phone out and I started scrolling through the filters. Could use a Maro. Yeah, not sure about that one. Maybe Mayfair. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. By the time I picked the perfect filter, the sunset had gone. And that was when I realised that I might have a bit of a problem with technology. Hello and welcome to Zestology. This is the podcast all about energy, vitality and motivation. I'm Tony Wrighton. It's my, adventures really towards better health and better energy. And, some people call technology and the rise of kind of distraction in terms of technology weapons of mass distraction, which I think is quite a good way of putting it. And there's no doubt that using things to excess like Instagram and Facebook, whilst they can be really positive sometimes, when you fall down that rabbit hole, it's very difficult to climb out again. And so as I walk around London and peruse the fact that this is still a bit of a problem for me, and I've been on a bit of an adjustment actually, because as you probably know, if you're a regular listener to this podcast, I record these podcasts out and about. And I spent almost a whole month away in Asia, loving life, away from technology, very little screen time, spending almost every part of every day outdoors. And then coming back to London in the middle of winter, there's a bit of an adjustment because for a start I'm back to work and I'm back at Sky and I need to be well informed and in front of screens for a certain part of my day just to know what's going on. But I still want to kind of maintain that holiday vibe, when you go away and you feel great and you're just kind of full of the joys of life. I still want that now. So that's the adjustment. Juggling everyday life and priorities and the fact that I want to use my phone occasionally. I don't want to just give it up and become a Luddite. Need Uber too much. But escaping the screens every once in a while as well. Today's guest is the perfect person to help us with this. Phil White has written a book on unplugging and getting away from technology. And it does seem to me that there is a bit of a backlash in terms of technology at the moment because more and more articles that I read starting to become more and more aware of the negative impact on technology on our lives. I think the phrase is the techlash is underway. So are you suffering from a bit of a techlash? Should you be putting down this screen that you're listening to this podcast on right now and going outside and frolicking in the open air? Let's find out with Phil White on Zestology. Good, well, we are recording now. Phil White, how are you?
Better than I deserve, my friend. How about yourself?
Very good. I've been looking forward to talking to you because unplugging has been a theme, certainly on my podcast, but it's definitely been a theme for me as well. The older I get and the more that pervasive that technology becomes, I know that I work better when I unplug. So I've been looking forward to talking to you about that. Perhaps we could start, because I've been kind of having a look at your website and looking at the things you do, and you've got quite an interesting backstory. You're a writer, but am I right in saying you also work with athletic teams?
So, my kind of via my co-authors. So, Fergus Connolly is a good trusty Irishman and was actually the first full-time sports scientist in the Premier League back in the day with Bolton Wanderers.
Wow.
And he's worked with NBA teams, NFL, and is now at the University of Michigan with Jim Harbaugh, which, some of the listeners may or may not know that I think Michigan's average gate on a Saturday is 112,000. So it's massive, which, college sports are a big business here. Yeah. And so, Fergus worked with a lot of teams. And then also another co-author, Kelly Starrett, of Mobility WOD fame in the books, like Becoming a Supple Leopard, obviously does quite a bit with pro teams. So he and I have 2 books coming out this year. And so, I don't directly, but just via those guys, and the work that they do with those teams and that level of athlete then kind of informs what we do with everyday Joes like myself, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because as Kelly always says, we test the concepts at the Formula One level of elite sport, and then we spin them back to street cars. And I'm very much a street car, Tony. I'm not a Formula One car.
Well, that's fine by me because I am very much a street car as well. So let's talk about Unplugged then. Evolving from technology to upgrading your fitness, performance and consciousness. And as you say, you've been trying them out on the Formula One cars. Are you really saying that unplugging can help people with performance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at certain disciplines, say in jiu-jitsu, or mixed martial arts, if you're not going to be fully present and focus, you're going to get submitted or choked down. In big wave surfing, one of the people that you'll have seen in the book we interview is Laird Hamilton. If you're Laird Hamilton and you're out messing around in giant waves at jaws that are taller than the average office building, you're going to get destroyed. And so what we see in some of these, in all of these disciplines, or any form of athletics, is that some of the flow states that Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel talk about in Stealing Fire and in Stephen's book, The Rise of Superman, that very deepest state of when you're really tapping into the power of your subconscious, which is anywhere from 10 to 30,000 times more RAM, if you want to think of it in computer terms, than any conscious state. You've got to be fully focused, and to be fully focused, you have to be unplugged.
Yeah, I agree. From a personal perspective, for the last few years, I've been doing this thing, which every day I try and switch off all technology, or at least all connectivity, for at least a couple of hours. I've spoken about it on a podcast a few times, and that would mean that I can use my phone if I'm reading a book on it, but I can't if I'm messaging someone else. So I'm in control of the inputs, basically. And I must admit, I've nearly always, whether it's 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours, that's the best time of my day. It's the best part of my day. It's most focused, most present that I am. I think I've got a disposition towards distraction, and maybe we all have. Is that the kind of essential message of the book in terms of getting into those states?
It's definitely one of them. Yeah. One of the stats that we give, which we actually found it in a book called Irresistible by a gentleman in New York called Adam Alter. And he really goes into how tech hardware and software is designed to be addictive. And one of the stats he gives is that the average American, and it's probably true for Western Europe and large parts of the world as well, looks at their phone and or touches their phone every 6.5 minutes. And if that isn't a hallmark of addiction, I don't know what is. And I think really what's interesting is if you try to take a little technology fast every week, be that 12 hours, 24 hours or longer, when you start to find yourself being twitchy about it, thinking, oh goodness, there's that email I probably should have responded to and whatever else. That's just confirming your addiction. But as with a lot of addictions, I don't think that people know they have a problem. And so, if you're using fitness technology like any other kind, it is not bad, right? The technology is neutral. It's a question. I love what you said, Tony, just a minute ago about making the technology a tool that works for you. And really, I would put in a comma there and then write or say, rather than a taskmaster. Because I think increasingly, if you have one of the, coach in the ear, these new Oakley sunglasses that have a little coaching app built in, and it will tell you when to speed up or slow down. Or I've had a guy almost run into me on a trail before, and we live in this beautiful little mountain town, and there's, there can be elk or indeed a black bear, or something of that nature, a mountain lion off to one side of the trail. There could be, there's a little stream running down the bottom of this, and it, you can see eagles and all kinds of great wildlife and birds in there. And not only was this guy not paying attention to any of that, no bears that day, that may have made him pay attention maybe for the last few seconds of his life. But silliness aside, he almost ran into me because he was looking down every few seconds at what I assume was real-time heart rate or route on his his little wrist-borne fitness tracker, and he had his headphones in, connected to an iPod on his arm, one of those little armband dealies you can get for your phone. So he had two devices on him, and he was completely subservient to the information they were giving him, and it completely took him out of the experience, so much so that he just looked up at the last second before he barreled into me. And if I had been on a mountain bike instead of running, that wouldn't have gone so well. So I think that sometimes we kind of diminish this rich experience we have. And you don't have to live in a little mountain town in Colorado to have a rich experience in nature. I mean, the studies that we quote in the book, there's a couple out of Japan particularly, that show that if you live in a city, in an urban environment, that just making a deliberate effort to walk by a river or a canal, or even through a city park or some kind of green space, that the effects that has at a neurological level on the brain, and therefore, the brain is obviously the CPU for the body. So it manifests itself in lower stress levels and lower perceived anxiety. We see even lower inflammation markers from being exposed to nature. And so you may get some of the benefits of that if you're running with your headphones in or looking at your little wrist-borne device every few seconds, but you're really going to take yourself out of the full richness of that potential experience. And so our thing is, look, use fitness technology to cue, to calibrate, and to inform. And then the rest of the time, maybe map your run, but look at the data later.
Yes.
Or use Strava or whatever. Look at it later. Don't let it diminish that experience during.
I totally agree with that. And actually, the only fitness wearables I've ever used are ones without displays. Because goodness knows, we don't need more ways to read a message or more inputs. And I agree with you. Isn't it sad that, it sounds absolutely idyllic where you live, and that guy wasn't enjoying the idyllic scenery, was he? Or connecting with his physicality in any way?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that, and again, that doesn't have to be, live in the mountains, live by the beach, and we're very blessed to be where we are. But it's just anywhere, and I would understand if their only choice is to run along a main road, well, they might want to block that out, right? Or if you find that the music helps you, we do know that from certain other research that music can lower the rate of perceived exertion, how hard you think your workout is, then great. If it's additive, if it's adding to your experience in some way, or it's a motivator to you in some way, then keep doing it by all means. We're not going to stand here and judge you or point fingers, but what we are saying that your instincts and also your connection to yourself, to other people around you, and to your environment are going to be much more finely tuned. And really, the kind of self-awareness we see in someone like Laird Hamilton is available to everyone. The reason he has that is not because he's superhuman or people look at him and because he's physically impressive, they think, oh my goodness, I could never be like Laird. He's 6'2", 220, something like that. Looks more like a rugby player than a surfer. But that kind of instinct, where in the book we mention an anecdote where he was actually out snowboarding with some friends, and friend was about to start down the mountain on a run on his board, and Laird felt that something was wrong and just instinctively grabbed the guy's collar and pulled him back. And a few seconds later, an avalanche just came through and just wiped out that whole section of the mountain where his friend was going to be.
Wow.
And that's, some people might say that that's a sixth sense or something like that, but we don't need to get too mystical. It's just because he's been out in winter sports when the surf isn't breaking big, or out in the ocean almost every day his entire life. And you just get tuned into things. But really, that's available to all of us every day. And
absolutely.
So to your point, go outside, take a walk, take a run, have a cycle, whatever your thing is, 20 to 30 minutes a day. And the acute benefits that you're going to get on that day are going to be pretty profound. But then also there will be accumulated benefits that will start to manifest over time. You might find you're feeling a little less stressed, or you're probably going to look forward to that time of knowing that that's going to be time to actually think. When do we take time to just be alone with our thoughts and practice some form of the discipline of solitude, which, a lot of world religions, a lot of disciplines around the world feature that, the practice of silence and solitude. Yes. But I think that sometimes we let the clamor of modern life crowd that out, and that's to our detriment.
There's a big problem here, Phil, for me anyway. And that is, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you're saying. And I genuinely think that, and this is why I wanted us to talk, I think this is one of the big issues facing humanity. Because we're only scratching the surface of what technology will be able to do in years to come. And actually, I think there'll be an increasing movement where people will kind of step away from technology a little bit and go and live in huts in the woods. And then they will notice the big elk running towards them when they go running. But the problem is, it's just, I know what's good for me, and yet I can't do it sometimes. And as you said, I do start to get itchy when my phone's been off for a couple of hours. And I do, when I'm not on one of those little kind of mini breaks for a couple of hours, I do find myself losing myself watching inane Instagram stories by someone I don't even like that much. And it's almost like I've not got the self-control to not do it. So do you have some kind of trips or exercises or a kind of how to or when to use technology kind of framework in this book?
Yeah, we really do. And we do talk about sometimes trying to calibrate the technology with what you're feeling. And so for one example would be sleep tracking. Yes. Okay. So, some of these wearables, or now we have like sensor equipped mattresses and all their pillows, this kind of stuff. One of the things that we suggest that, sometimes they'll give you a composite score out of 100. And so what we suggest doing, if you're going to use that, great. And if it encourages, better sleep habits, and you start to use it as a tool to think, okay, is my bedroom too hot or cold? Am I blocking out light? Am I blocking out noise? Am I staying away from screens a couple of hours before bed? So if it starts to become a catalyst to better habits, then great. But Brian McKenzie, my co-author, one of the two co-authors with Dr. Andy Galpin, he tells his anecdote of how it actually made him more stressed to track his sleep. And because he's super competitive, he started to become competitive with himself, and then would become frustrated if those scores didn't go up. And then what he found, to go deeper than that, is there were some days, say, he would get like a 60 out of 100, but yet he'd feel completely refreshed and be fine. Yes. And there were other days he'd score in the 90s, and he'd feel trashed, from the workout or the race or whatever he did the day before. And so just by keeping a good old-fashioned kind of sleep journal of just, maybe rate 1 to 10 how refreshed and ready to go you are in the morning for a month while you're sleep tracking, and then next to that, write down that sleep tracker score and see if it correlates.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I think with regard to what you said, the first part of the question is with regard to self-control, is just start small, like anything else, So if somebody was getting off the couch for the first time, lived a largely sedentary life, or maybe it had a big injury and been sedentary for a few months, it would be useless for that person to jump right back in and look up, say, like a rugby player like George North on the internet and say, okay, I'm going to follow George North's training program because it made him big and strong and fast. Okay. And just go right at that. Right. Or pick any expert level elite athlete. But what would be more sense is for them to either get with a trainer or just to start really small. Right. And just say, okay, well, today I'm going to go for a 15-minute jog. Or pick an activity. Maybe you like playing tennis as a kid, you haven't done it for a while, and one of your mates lives nearby and he likes to play tennis. Hey mate, let's after work tomorrow, let's grab our rackets and go play. Maybe you just have a knockabout, or do a couple of sets after work twice a week, whatever it is, kind of an easy on-ramp. Well, I think we rarely apply the same approach, like this gradual, sustainable progression approach to the rest of our lives, do we? So I think that rather than saying, I'm going to go on like a weekend-long tech fast, well, maybe that would be too hard for you to sustain. So maybe just like you said, just say, okay, I know I don't usually go to bed, say, until midnight. Well, from now, tonight I'm going to turn my phone off at 10 o'clock and not look at it. If you're a person that checks, a lot of us, what do we do last thing at night? Check our phone, right? What do we do first thing in the morning? Check our phone. Or maybe if you're a morning person, you do it the other end of the day. You say, no, I'm going to get up tomorrow, and until 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, I'm not going to check my phone. And that doesn't have to be every day, but maybe say I'm just going to do that once a week. So you start with an hour or two, and then with the goal of eventually progressing to maybe doing 12 hours or 24 hours, and just doing a little bit at a time and getting yourself used to that and finding purposeful ways to fill that time. I think over time, just like a workout, how that soreness, if you're getting back in after, like I said, after being sedentary or injured or whatever, that soreness starts to diminish a little bit. You start to get your sea legs under you, you start to feel a little bit better, start to feel stronger and a bit more capable. Same thing with this, with any kind of personal discipline. So start small, work your way up.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, when I think kind of slightly apocalyptically about the future and what it's going to be like in, say, 50 years from now, I just wonder, because I think this stuff is important, but I don't think that many people are that conscious of how extraordinarily different our lives are to how they were before smartphones, for example, and even over the last 5 years. And I just wonder how bad this issue is going to be when we're all going to be... I know Google Glasses never quite took off, but there'll be something similar at some point. We'll all have a microchip in our arm and we'll be getting 3D hologram messages flashing up in front of our eyes. And I mean, how bad is it going to get?
Yeah, I mean, Harari's book Homo Deus, paints a pretty grim picture of what it might end up being. Or if you see something like Blade Runner 2049,
yes,
and that
I've
kind of
seen
dystopia.
it. Yeah.
And what's interesting in that, they talk about like the great blackout where all the data was lost.
Yes.
Might want to print off your photos occasionally and back them up in some way. But yeah, I mean, and we don't want to be, try to be George Orwell, right? Or someone like that, or Huxley back in the day with Brave New World, and just think doom and gloom, or think that things are going to go to the extreme. But I think a good friend of mine, Pete Hitzman, who's one of the editors at the great website Breaking Muscle here in the States, which is a great resource for anyone who's into training and that, or coaching. He told me about this app called Rescue Time, and it's also a website. And and it's astonishing if you submit yourself to the discipline of something like that, and really let something that's objective. This is a way that technology can help us cure what ails us with regard to technology, which is kind of a paradox, isn't it, or ironic? And it's amazing how much time we spend, like you said earlier, diddling around on Instagram or messing with Facebook. And even I find, if I'm maintaining the websites on behalf of myself and my co-authors for these books, I'll post those to say Andy Galpin's been, done a couple of interviews, or Brian's going to be at a conference, and I'll post that to the pages. Well, then, that's just the Unplugged page that I manage, or with Fergus, the Game Changer page. But then I'll go back to my personal page and lose half an hour like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And I think it transcends sport. Okay, so we can talk about it from the perspective of what it does to diminish your instincts as an athlete and everything else. But these kind of things are all around you. So whether you go out to a site of natural beauty or of historical interest, and you see people just staring at their phones instead of this amazing waterfall or castle or whatever it is that's right in front of their eyes that really deserves their full attention. And also, why did you pay your admission if you're not going to go and enjoy it? But even I've been out with my kids for dinner, say at a local pizza place, and there was this couple, these parents, and they were both looking at their phones, and the little girl not only had an iPad but had the big kind of Hello Kitty like DJ Can headphones, you know, and there was not one word exchanged at that table during the duration of that meal. They just occasionally would, half look down and grab a slice of pizza and stuff it in their gob and proceed and just continue with whatever they're messing around with on their device. And so I even think, we have two boys, 8 and 10, and we're not Luddites, we're not extremists. They get 20 minutes of supervised internet time a day, and it's a good discipline. If they're fighting a lot, it's the first thing to go, and they'll get DVDs from the library and that kind of thing. And so we're not complete Luddites. But
is that quite low in terms of like their mates? I mean, that sounds very low to me.
I think in my 10-year-old school class that 80% of the kids or more have a fully unlocked smartphone, and probably an iPad, and probably an Xbox or a PlayStation.
Wow.
And that's that's pretty terrifying. And my younger son Harry is 8, and probably 60 to 70% of the kids are in the same scenario with that.
And so that means presumably they can access adult content as well, or maybe there's some kind of parental control.
We hear some things. Our kids come home and tell us some things that they have heard in the playground that kids of that age should not be exposed to.
Well, I mean, how could they not be? I mean, look, it may not be kind of adult content as such, but I mean, I know a lot of kids are on Instagram, for example, and at some point you're going to see comment. It's just, I mean. Are they not a bit livid, though, that dad won't let them use the internet for more than 20 minutes a day?
No, not at all. No, we've never heard it. And we've never heard, as the result of peer pressure, I really want, a phone, or for, when they start making their Christmas lists, I don't know, when kids start to do that February or whatever it is, that kind of deal. We've never heard that, luckily.
Wow.
And I mean, it really, we're not, and it's not to say that we're these great parents, because a lot of days I give myself an F- grade, as a parent, but really we just want them to be active in some way every day and be creative in some way every day. And again, just goes back to first principles and essentialism, what you try to focus on. And so, if you're growing up in a place like this where trails everywhere and there's the lake and everything else, I mean, you just you want to be able to have them enjoy that. And I remember as a kid just rambling, with my mates where I grew up in Dorset, and sometimes how it goes in the Shire, as we call it. You just go until you got lost, and then think, we see that church on the way out, and just try to navigate back by landmarks and hope you get home for dinner. And if not, then maybe you're a bit late. But that's the kind of thing we did, or just take a ball to the park. And it's like the old Fast Show skit, jumpers for goalposts. Marvelous, isn't it?
Exactly.
But that was it. And what were some of your experiences as a kid like that?
Well, I mean, absolutely loads, because I was lucky enough not to have internet. And then I tell you what, I was lucky enough not to have internet when I was at university, and because it was just coming in as I was leaving. And I feel very grateful for the fact, firstly, there were no smartphones to record some of my bad behavior at parties. And I think that would actually make you react very differently to kind of, the odd kind of dodgy drug taking experience, which you probably shouldn't have got involved in. And then I just feel like the opportunity to have gone through my childhood, and it'd be more likely that I'd be in the present more of the time because I haven't got the distractions. It's one of the main battles for me. It really is. But I think that's really awesome what you're doing with your kids. I mean, that is especially amazing that they don't really seem to miss it.
Well, trying. I mean, it's similar to, you hear other parents sometimes talk about like, I just can't get them to eat their vegetables. Well, if you've presented them with vegetables every meal of their life, including when they were kids, like pureeing it for them. Yeah. And that's the only option. I mean, I really liked this interview I saw with Michelle Obama a couple of years ago, where she said, even in the White House, right, like these kids could have whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, in theory. Yes. She said, look, there's none of this nonsense at dinner time. What the kids are having is what they're having. And I guess if they don't like it, they're going to have to go to bed hungry. And that was the stance of the Obamas, at the time, the most powerful man in the world, and his wife. That was what they do in their household. So good enough for the former president of the United States and his family. Good enough for me and anybody else, I would think. What about
good enough for the current president of the United States? No, we won't go there.
Oh, we won't go there. That would be a rabbit hole, wouldn't it, mate?
Yeah. Wow. So, I think that in itself is food for thought for any parent listening. And then I guess the other thing is that as a parent, you have to embody what you want your children to get involved with as well. There's no point in being distracted if you want them not to be distracted, because the way they'll learn is they'll learn from what you do, not what you say.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that
So what's your daily routine in terms of internet? Do you get up in the morning and switch on first thing, or?
No, I'm useless in the mornings, mate. just through a combination of force of habit and just chronobiology, just my natural predisposition, I figured out pretty early that I when it comes to book length work, that I do my best work at night when there aren't interruptions, which means after everyone else is asleep. And so I go late. So yeah, mornings is just really struggling to get up. Frankly, I'd probably get a bad sleep score. I don't know. Maybe I should buy a sensor embedded mattress and we'd find out. But joking aside, just schedule some interviews. Maybe right now, my good lady wife Nicole is my secret weapon with regard to all my books, and so we're going through the final edits of my book Waterman 2.0, which is the first book with Kelly Starrett that'll be out in May via his website at mobilitywod.com. Little plug there. Sorry about that.
Yeah, not a worry.
But yeah, so we'll go over edits that because she's old school, she has me print everything out and she marks them up by hand. And so we'll go through all my maddening inconsistencies and repetition and everything else and that kind of thing. And then my own unplugged time kind of extends it into the afternoon. So not to say I never look at the internet in the morning, because that would be rubbish. I bill clients and I schedule interviews like this one. And then I walk in the afternoon after lunch, I walk to the furthest coffee shop away in our little town, which involves me walking along the lake and through the trees, and it guarantees me 2 miles out and 2 miles back of walking.
Yeah.
And unless, if one of the kids is sick and I know I may get called back or something to take to the doctor or what have you, then I'll answer a call from my wife. Or if we're within days of a deadline, I will answer a call from one of my co-authors. But other than that, my phone is switched off and in my pocket, and it remains so at the coffee shop. At worst on silent, and at best switched off and in my backpack. And so that's some good time. I'm starting to get into my second coffee cycle, and I've got a gratuitous view of the lake, and I like to stand to work, and so it's just the right height for standing at the coffee shop. And you just get some focused writing done. And as you said earlier, there are times when you have to do web research or whatever for a book or a magazine article, so you have to be online, but really just try to be disciplined and not mess with social media, and not let the research even take me down rabbit holes. Because there are times when, say you're looking at a story on Outside Magazine's website or, BBC, or pick something, right? And then there's that suggested list of stories on one side or below. And you think, oh, well, that's interesting.
I know.
You try to justify it to your brain, like, well, that's vaguely related to my topic. And then one thing leads to another. And you did 2 hours of in quotes research and produced 0 publishable words, which is no good. So
you were talking about Kelly Starrett and how he's kind of so focused and so brilliant at what he does, and Laird Hamilton actually as well. Laird Hamilton would be a good example. Laird Hamilton must have times when he goes down internet rabbit holes as well.
He does. He doesn't do any of his social media. He has his profile's on there. He isn't doing it.
He doesn't post himself?
No. I think that maybe if they do Q&As sometime or something like that. But even with Kelly, I was with Kelly last week, and I was with Brian McKenzie this weekend, and Brian and I went on a long hike, and actually he and his wife had just moved into a new place in just outside San Francisco. And so that's a really good friend that shows up when their friends are moving in. That was really considerate of me, wasn't it? But anyway, and so Brian, it's not like we're sitting there, and he's, he has multiple businesses, including Power Speed Endurance, which kind of grew out of, obviously, people might know him as the CrossFit endurance guy for the best part of a decade. Yeah. And then there's a lot of new seminars and this kind of thing around the art of breath and some of the breathing practices that we're getting into to help people either get out of certain states that they're stuck in, which for me would be, because I work late and I'm looking at a screen late, how do I wind down? Well, one way is to do 5 to 10 minutes of something like a 5-second nasal inhale, a 15-second hold, and then a 10-second nasal exhale. But there's a free little tool on his website, powerspeedendurance.com, that will let people calculate that and get their own numbers from that. Right. And really, again, we start to see that some of the habits that these guys have are literally, like I said, Brian does that breath work 5 or 10 minutes in the evening. He does a different kind of breath work first thing in the morning when he gets up, and sometimes combines that with some kind of hot and cold, the sauna and the ice bath, or some people could do like a hot bath and a cold shower. And so they have these kind of what Charles Duhigg in The Power of Habit would call kind of keystone habits that inform the rest of their day. But they're also not, despite having fairly big social media followings, they're not on social media all day. They're not, when you're talking to them, you're not trying to look through their device so that you could look in their eyes. They're Kelly, Brian, Andy, the rest of them are very focused on what they do. They're very much engaged with their better halves, and in Kelly's case, with his kids. And I think really what it comes down to is a combination of essentialism, just trying to identify some essential practices and keystone habits, and then also boundaries, just setting boundaries, because they have so many demands on their time and requests for interviews and everything else that they could literally just do podcasts all day, but that isn't going to advance the ball. And so, it's amazing.
Those boundaries, it's learning to say no is important as well, isn't it? So, yeah.
And so every one of them that I've had the pleasure to work with, they do practice what they preach, and they are very, if you're with them, they're very much in the room.
Right. Phil, something I've asked everyone on Zestology is, what is one, and I'm interested to ask you because you are a writer yourself, what is one book that you would recommend, and one tip for living with more energy, vitality, and motivation? One book, one tip. What would you go for?
Oh, that's tough, isn't it?
It is tough.
Okay, so on the book side, I'll do something that was pretty influential in my thinking when we were writing Unplugged, Andy, Brian, and I. So there's a book by the British journalist Richard Asquith called Feet in the Clouds.
Right.
And it's about fell running, which at the time he said was arguably the last truly amateur British sport. The prize money might be like a 4-pack of Guinness and a $20 gift card to your local pub or something at best.
Cool.
At best. And so, it's really just this delightful story. And it's participatory. He got into the fell running and did some of these rounds where you have to run up and down a few big bloody hills, within 24 hours. And really just, to me, it was a story of, again, athletes who are truly present when they're doing their activity and are doing it for the love of it, not for the glory, not to show off the latest tech tools. Maybe the newest thing they might have is a 2-year-old pair of battered Innovate running shoes or something like that. And really just a delightful story. So Feet in the Clouds by Richard Asquith, a really good one.
Yeah, really good. And then what about one tip on living with more energy, vitality, and motivation? Would it be something relating to Unplugged?
If I could cheat and make it 2 parts, I would say try to get outdoors in nature. And again, if you live in a city, just, find a bloody park to walk through, or some green space. And if you don't, then you'll have more options to you. But try to be unplugged in nature, fully focused, 20 to 30 minutes a day or longer if you can. And then secondarily, try to cultivate some kind of breathing practice, like start to understand the basics of breathing, and then find a tool, like I said, not to promote Brian too much, but on his powerspeedendurance.com website, there are some free tools on there that will kind of help you. It really has you do an exhale retention test, and out of that will spit out some numbers of stuff to do at different times a day, completely free. And really just try to then see what breathing patterns are associated when you're stressed out, when you're working out, when you're tired, when you're feeling pretty good, and then find how you can start manipulating your breath to get you into that physical, cognitive, or emotional state that you want to be in. And if you're stuck in a state where, stress state or whatever it is, to help you break out of that. Because really what we're finding is that the breath, your breath is the remote control for your brain and your nervous system. It's something that's always with you, and it's something that's accessible, and really you don't need very much knowledge to start playing around with some of that stuff, and it can improve the quality of your sleep, improve your energy levels, and really just help you be able to, for a lot of people, be less anxious and less stressed, which you and I both know, if there's any chronic problem we have in today's day and age, that's probably one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil, it's been great to talk to you. I feel quite inspired now, and I've just been doing a little bit of research on Brian McKenzie, and I followed him on Instagram as well. And I'm going to, and I think the breathing thing is fascinating as well. Where can people find out more about you and, importantly, the book?
Oh, okay, most kind of you, mate. Yeah, I mean, first I would say I'm just trying to serve these guys, my co-authors, and I just happen to be able to take words out of their head and put it on the page. So check them out, not just Brian, but Kelly Storrett at mobilitywod.com, Fergus Connolly at thegameischanging.net. He's ahead of the game of the .net, and andygalpin.com. And then, yeah, I'd love to have a conversation with anyone, everyone. So it's philwhitebooks.com. And then most of the social sites, ironically, given what we just talked about, just / or at Phil White Books. And the books are on Amazon. So
yes, yeah. And I know from having looked on Amazon, you've got an extraordinary amount of 5-star reviews. And the percentage, it's something like 95% 5 stars. So people are really loving the book.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of you to say. I mean, really, we just tried to write, all these books, that the aim is not to enrich us in any way. I mean, royalties are nice and this kind of thing. And I'd love to have conversations like this one that you were so gracious to give me the chance to have today, Tony. But I think that our goal is to just help people understand themselves better and to improve their life. And so, all of these guys and myself have that as one of our core values and really our core mission. And so I hope that comes across on the page and that people are able to use that. And also sometimes even if people disagree with us and say, oh, well, have you seen this latest study? Or, you hadn't really thought about it like this. And sometimes it comes out of almost a disagreement or an argument that if you're humble enough to be willing to accept that you're wrong, then sometimes you can advance your thinking that way. So yeah, even if you disagree with anything you heard today, shoot me a message on my website. Let's have a chat, and I'd love to see what your thoughts and perspectives are.
Yeah, and the main thing that I've done is, because I haven't read the book yet, but I really want to, and I'm absolutely excited about reading it now. So it's on my list as well. Phil, thank you so much for coming on Zestology. Really appreciate it.
No, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today.
That's it. Thank you to Phil. Hope that's helped you with some ideas for unplugging. 20 minutes screen time a day. It's not much, is it? But I have a funny kind of feeling if I was to limit myself to that much technology, I'd probably be happier and more well-adjusted, even if I never replied to my emails. Thanks for listening to Zestology. As always, some cracking guests coming up over the next month or so. If you want to share it with someone, that'd be awesome. If you'd like to write a review on iTunes, that's really helpful in terms of getting the message to more people and giving me a bit of feedback. And as always, the Zestology book club is up and running on Facebook as well. That's it. Time to unplug. See ya.